Hello everyone, Jet here, and welcome to Let's Talk Total War Three Kingdoms, where we're going to be talking about, well, the new blog they've dropped, the Diplomacy in Total War Three Kingdoms Part 1, guys, where we've got a very thoughtful general here, Liu Bao? I can't remember which one it is, anyway, so... As with all of the things with this, guys, this is, this is very early in the development still. While we do have a date, everything is subject to change. But I've had a quick look at this, read through all this while I was at work, and I've been actually very excited to come home and talk through this because it's really interesting. There is a video which you can find on this. I'll also try from Total War directly. I'll link it in through my video, which is worth a look, though it's not in as much depth as this, guys. Anyway, as it says, brew up a bucket of tea and buckle in. This is going to be a long read. And we've got a guy here in a top hat telling us to do that. So, you might want to get a drink or something beforehand. I've just finished my tea, but, I've had it, so I'm all ready for this. So, but we've got a lot of change and a lot of things, so this is quite an interesting one. Total War Three Kingdoms isn't just a new period for Total War. It represents a phase of evolution for a host of traditional features and systems that you'll be familiar with from past titles. These include army composition and management, characters who can now build relationships and form attitudes towards one another, buildings, technologies, and much more. Diplomacy is a biggie and marks the single most significant redesign to the system in Total War's history. It's the subject of our first Three Kingdoms campaign walkthrough, which you can watch here. As I mentioned, there is a link to it there. I will also link it down below. I'd suggest having a look at that afterwards as well. There's a few other little things leaked in this which I'll talk about as well, which are quite interesting. But we thought a wider ranging explanation was in order, as there's loads going on under the hood, hence this blog. In brief, our aim is to enable the player to achieve a wide range of outcomes through diplomacy, via a system that offers more potential actions, a far more granular approach to deal making, and a dash of intrigue thrown in for good measure. Sorry, muted myself there. I am still coughing quite a bit, so I'm getting over it, but it's still there a bit. I may re-record a few of these when I'm completely not coughing at all, so I don't have to mute myself and you watch me on the camera coughing. Anyway, where was I? I lost myself when I was doing that. The result is something that enables you to execute more elaborate plans and become more of a puppet master than ever before. To support these new aims and features, we've essentially rewritten the diplomacy module and AI from scratch in order to fully support and exploit all the new tools available. Let's start with some of the basics. So, diplomatic attitude and deal evaluation. Your diplomatic standing with another faction is still the key factor in determining whether they'll deal with you, and defines which deals they're willing to discuss. However, another faction's attitude towards you is coloured by more than just your previous military and diplomatic form. AI warlords also take into account any spy actions you've taken against them, your warlord's friendship or rivalry status with them, how much strategic threat you pose. While AI factions in past games took note of your military strength, they now account for how aggressive you are and your armies are as well. So it sounds like, a lot of this stuff it has taken into account before, but it sounds like it's just doing it in a more in-depth way. So it's looking at your strength, it's looking at your threat. So obviously if the deal is going to make you less of a threat, they're more likely to take it. Whereas in some of them it's been, you're big and powerful, we just don't like you because you're big and powerful. And there'll still be some of that, but it will also potentially be, you're big and powerful, we want you to like us so you don't crush us. I'm hoping that's the case anyway, and that's kind of how I'm reading a lot of this. So your diplomatic standing defines which deals you'll be able to offer an AI warlord. You'll unlock new types of deal as your faction rank rises too. You begin the game as a mere noble, and will have to work your way through the ranks before you can claim to become emperor, with each rank bringing new benefits such as advanced diplomatic options. When you propose a deal to an AI warlord, he'll consider what it's going to cost you, and that cost can vary enormously depending on a host of factors. Diplomatic standing plays a big role, of course, as well as your relative military strength. But a bunch of concepts new to Free Kingdoms play into the AI's evaluation of a proposal costs. So there's going to be other things affecting it as well. How much they actually respect and trust you is important. Trust you plays an important role. Each AI warlord can also identify a main threat to its existence. If you're the main threat, certain deals will become easier, while others will become harder. So things which will make you less of a threat. So say they're going to be paying me money back over a while. Actually, that's probably because I'm not going to want to cut that off by going to war with them, and things like that. Or if I'm somebody's more, powerful than me, it might sound daft. It might be good to take a loan out of them from them, because if they go to war with me, they'll lose the income I'm giving them. So it's going to make other considerations in place there. And it sounds like you can do things like loans and things are much easier in a much better way. Again, it is described in here, but it actually does that. It shows you in the video, so that's well worth a watch afterwards. Likewise, if you share a common threat in the world, deals will be achieved on more affordable terms. Distance plays a part too. The further away a faction is geographically, the less relevant and valuable it becomes to an AI negotiator. He'll also assess the diplomatic consequences of the deal you place before him, how the rest of the world will react to the deal. If the deal with you impacts his diplomatic standing with other factions, you can expect the cost to rise in line with the severity. Which is kind of understandable and makes it a bit more realistic. Your warlord now has a trustworthiness rating, which can rise and fall in line with your behaviour, and this affects how a warlord respects you. Certain actions are viewed as treacherous. Cancelling a 10-turn loan repayment, for example, or breaking another major commitment. Some AI personalities openly oppose treacherous behaviour and will feel duty-bound to declare war on you and because interpersonal respect plays part in diplomacy, a faction changing hands between one warlord and another can be a major catalyst for change. Here's an example. Now, before I get into this, I do apologise for my pronunciation of the names. Please let me know when I get them wrong. I have looked up some of these beforehand, but it doesn't mean I'm going to get them right. So the Han Governor, Liu Biao, forges strong diplomatic bonds with the warlord Liu Bei. Their two factions trade, and they lend each other funds from time to time. The trust builds between them. However, a great general under the tyrant Dongzhu, one that Liu Biao has met many times in battles, and who is now one of his major rivals, becomes dissatisfied with his lot in life, leaves Dongzhu's service, and is subsequently hired by Liu Bei, for his battlefield expertise. This is where I have problems with some of the names, guys, as you probably guessed. As time passes, the general fights side by side with Liu Bei, and the two form a powerful friendship. Liu Bei ultimately adopts the general as his son and heir. When Liu Bei passes away, the new heir steps up and assumes the mantle of warlord, taking control of the faction. One of your major rivals is now in command of a faction which used to be close. Under his leadership, deals become more costly to achieve, and diplomatic relationships begin to sour. So that's a very interesting sounding thing. So basically, as your general, obviously, so you want to think, also, I guess you want to think how friendly people are with each other when you choose your heir. But there's something else in there. The fact that a general can become dissatisfying, leave someone and be hired by someone else. So it sounds like you're going to be able to trade generals and things. And we have a bit more later on which tells us other things similar to that. But we're going to be able to get generals from one faction to another, which is quite interesting. I'm quite looking forward to that. Okay, now the negotiation stage. A key change for diplomacy is the introduction of a more granular negotiation. Diplomatic dealings now take the form of haggling, and with more tradable items, resources and packs in your diplomatic armory than ever before, you're less reliant on pure cash deals. When you approach a warlord, and propose a deal, you'll get a positive or negative evaluation figure indicating how much cost he attaches to it. The idea is to balance the scales with different offers, so you reach a positive figure of at least +1, which ensures he'll sign. Here's an example of how it can work in practice. Now, one thing I say about this from the sounding and from looking at it in their video is, if you've played Paradox games and the way they do their diplomacy with all the figures and the +1 and you're trying to balance it, it sounds very similar. It seems like they've channeled a little bit of their inner Paradox here, which as far as I'm concerned is a good thing, because one of the things which Paradox does do well is its diplomacy and its trade systems. So anyway, scenario 2 here. Liu Bei approaches Cao Cao. I've been told apparently it's not Cao Cao, it is a Cao Cao, or something similar to that. I'm probably still butchering it, but it's better than saying Cao Cao, guys. Anyway, approaches Cao Cao and proposes a trade deal. It turns out that Cao Cao is very keen to sign a deal, indicated by a +8 figure in the diplomacy UI. As it only requires a minimum of +1 to seal the deal, this gives Liu Biao some positive sentiment wiggle room to play with. Maybe there's more he can get in return. He browses Cao Cao's list of owned ancillaries and spices a fine, fast horse. He proposes that Cao Cao throw in the horse as well, which subtracts 7 from the overall evaluation total, leaving it at +1 in short. Cao Cao places a high value on his stallion, but the trade deal with Liu Biao just outweighs it. Liu Biao makes the offer, and it's accepted. Their factions are now trading trading to mutual benefit, and as a bonus, Liu Biao now has a fine new charger to ride into battle. Or maybe he'll gift it to one of his generals in order to increase their satisfaction level. So this little bit here, and obviously we're learning about new things here, but this little bit tells us a couple of things. So things like mounts, obviously in other games you just got them as time went on and things, but they're going to be tradable things. And actually, if you look at the video, there's sections for armor, all sorts of different bits, which we do talk about a bit more in this. But so you've got all these different things, so you're going to be able to offer you're going to be able to get hold of horses and stallions, and so you'll be able to get better horses or better armor or different weapons and things for your generals, or you can give them to your people. And again, we're talking about the satisfaction level here, so you want to keep your generals satisfied or they will leave. Now, I don't know how they leave, if they revolt and take an army, or if they just go and look for work elsewhere, which kind of sounds like left service and got recruited by somebody else in the previous one. So a couple of other little hidden little extra bits in there, which are also hinting at new features for us there, the ability to be able to get these things. Anyway, let's go on with this. So when you're requesting a deal with an AI warlord and their first response is a negative figure, this doesn't mean they're unwilling to deal. If it's beyond their consideration, you'll get a flat no. A negative figure that includes the warlord perceives what a negative figure that includes that the warlord perceives the offer to be valuable to you and wants to make it worthwhile, and they of course arrive at this figure according to factors you mentioned above. Sorry, coughing again. So you can always haggle and tweak, and you can do it the other way from that to make it so you can offer extra things. With such an offer on the table, a new button will appear marked "Make this work." This is a down to brass tacks shortcut, which tells you what the deal is worth to the other warlord, thus giving you a baseline to work for on the negotiation. So you might ask a warlord for military access to his commanderies, for example, which he places a very high value on. You make a request, and it appears with a -12 value attached in the negotiation panel. Then you click "Make this work." The value balances up to +1, and the demand for 4,500 gold appears, which is quite a lot. This is the sum you'd need. Well, I say that's a lot. We don't know how much gold's going to be worth in this, but I'm assuming it's a lot. This is the sum you'd need to pay him in order to sign a military access agreement. If that's a bit rich for you, here's where you begin the haggling process by adding further offers such as food, territory. Trading territory, guys. Just putting that out there a few times, as I know that's something which people have been shouting for in the last few games, which we used to be able to do and we can't do anymore. Payment by installments, or something else entirely. Maybe you can drive down that lump sum to something manageable, or even do away with it altogether in lieu of an arrangement which is less costly to you, but of equally valuable to them. Such as if you're at war with the same person, maybe you give military access and he gives military access just to help your campaigns. Now, there's still a bit to go, guys. We're most of the way through this now. Vassal state. The other thing which you can do here, which I have seen, is, so for example, you can get a big lump sum of money and then offer to pay it back to them over turns, but with slightly more. So, I could borrow 4,500 and then offer to pay 5,000 back across 10 turns or so, which again, they quite like because obviously they're making more. And it puts you in a situation where neither of you is necessarily going to... Obviously, if they're planning on going to war with you, it's not necessarily going to be good. But that would be something good to do with some factions because it means they're less likely to want to go to war with you and greases the wheels a bit. But also, it gives you a chunk of gold if you need. Anyway, vassal states. The vassal mechanics have expanded significantly. The relationship between a vassal state and its lord is now multi-dimensional, offering new benefits to both owning vassals and becoming one. There's also a burden of responsibility and a healthy dose of relationship management for a vassal lord to attend to. The core benefit for a vassal lord is that his vassals pay him a healthy percentage of their gross income each turn. In turn, he's expected to protect them militarily, which is kind of what we had before. Now, there's a lot more to it here. Therefore, if a faction declares war on a vassal, it also declares war on the vassal's lord, and that protection is reciprocal. If you declare war on a vassal lord, his vassals will join him in the war against the aggressor. This makes military actions against a lord with multiple vassals, potentially very dangerous prospect. And that's where we're certainly with people like Cao Cao sound, because he's very much a puppet master, so he'll be able to pluck lots of vassals from around the place, from around him, so that while he's not necessarily got a huge empire, he can use that to produce a very good sort of buffer zone and a lot of allies who will come to war with him. I can just hear my son crying slightly out of the side of my ear. I do apologise if you can hear that quietly in the background. He's being put to bed by his mum at the moment. So anyway, it also means that becoming a vassal needn't be a bad thing. And while it can be forced, it can also be a choice. You can actually offer to become a vassal for another faction. If you're small, militarily weak and threatened by your neighbours, becoming a vassal for a larger power grants you those protections. You still function as a faction, of course. Vassalage is not a form of slavery, but there are certain limitations, as I'm sure you're all aware. You'll pay a tithe to your lord each turn, and if you wish to initiate a war against another faction, you'll have to negotiate permission with your lord. If they agree, they will join you in the war. As a vassal, you can still engage in trade and general diplomacy with other factions, enhancing your empire in spite of your state. Moreover, being a vassal lord does not mean that you are subservient Being a vassal does not mean that you are I'm starting that one again, guys. Moreover, being a vassal lord does not mean that your vassals are subservient to you in all matters. I'll get there eventually. Diplomatic standing is still important. If your standing with your vassals drops below a certain threshold, they'll declare their independence, which puts you in a state of war with them. But a vassal can also approach its lord and negotiate for liberation, cutting a deal for their independence instead. A far more diplomatic solution to regain solo status. A lord can even choose to grant independence to their vassal, which you might expect brings a huge benefit to their diplomatic standing. Even better, granting your vassal, well, it depends. If you grant your vassal independence because it's on your border and it's about to be swallowed by somebody and you don't want to get into a war, not sure is necessarily gonna make everybody happy, but that's a very distinct circumstance. Even better, granting your vassal independence and inviting them to an alliance you're part of, essentially liberating them, elevating them and treating them as an equal, will please them beyond compare. Now that second half makes sense in that sort of situation, but if you're just cutting somebody loose because they're going to get eaten up by somebody else you don't want to be at war with, I hope there are situations where dropping a vassal will be a negative effect because basically you're dropping them because somebody else wants to swallow them. Anyway, at the other end of the spectrum, lords can choose to annex a vassal, at which point the vassal's territories, armies, and characters become wholly owned by the lord as part of his faction. This carries a penalty, however. It is a dishonourable thing to do, and as such will be seen by all other factions as a major act of treachery, even more so if the lord has already pledged to never annex their vassal as part of the prior negotiation. In this situation, where the lord has multiple vassals and annexes one of them, the lord will suffer massive diplomatic standing penalties with all their other vassals. It's wholly possible that some, or all, will declare immediate independence from and enter a war against their former lord. And who would blame them, fearing they might be next in line to face the hostile takeover from the honourless lord. So that sounds like another interesting thing. So you can annex, which is a very nice thing, being able to annex vassals, but you do want to be very careful doing it. I do kind of hope there's a way that you can potentially do it over time, but I don't think, I was hoping there'd be a way you could do that over time without as many impacts. You just draw yourselves closer until you become one, and it's not really a I'm taking over with an iron fist type thing. It doesn't sound like we've got that, but you never know. That might come in later on. And it would still annoy other factions and potentially worry other vassals anyway. The benefits of owning a stable and carefully managed network of vassals can be great. With the income they collectively generate for you, there's less reliance on funds to generate your own infrastructure, perhaps freeing you up to pursue other civic goals. So, vassals do sound like a really interesting... It sounds like there's been a lot more thought put into them, which is good, and it sounds like they're going to be a lot more useful. They are useful in the other games, but it sounds like they're going to be a lot more useful to you in this, and you're going to have to think about them a lot more. Anyway, diplomatic actions. Free Kingdoms offers a significant range of new diplomatic actions. Rather than overwhelm the player with a screenful, we've bound them into distinct categories: war and peace, trade and marriage, alliances, and diplomatic treaties. War and peace. War and peace does what it says on the tin. A formal declaration of war and peace reside here, including support actions such as requests and offers for military support. And there are plenty of new options in the mix, not least of those regarding vassals, as we've just covered. These are broadly covered in the vassal section above. You can now saber rattle a warlord by issuing an ultimatum of a war ultimatum. It's a useful tool for getting what you want, but should only be employed with due forethought. Threatening a faction that is twice as powerful as yours militarily, for example, is going to get you into hot water tout sweet. For anybody who's not British and doesn't understand the colloquialism, it just means it's going to get you in trouble quickly. Unlike more civil negotiations, the other warlord will keep his cards close to his chest. Threaten a faction with war, and the AI warlord's evaluation numbers will be hidden. Unlike other forms of negotiation, you have to make your best guess at the outcome, blind to the true numbers. If they reject your demands, war it is. And that's quite nice. So if you're doing something like that, you will hide it. You might be able to get a general idea, and I dare say people will work out ways of working it out, but for a general player, you won't necessarily know. alongside the usual cash requests, or trade and marriages, alongside the usual cash requests and offers, you can now request regular payments or offer regular payments in return for something. These are fixed term deals which will expire after 10 turns. This is something we used to have in the past. Now, I like the idea of again, and broaden your options considerably. How many times have you desperately needed a truce with another faction, but can't persuade them without a wad of cash you just don't have? Now you can pay them in installments, assuming they trust you to stick to the agreement, and of course, it also means you can lend money with payments returned in installments. Food, which is critical to public order and military supplies, is also now tradable, and provided you have the storage infrastructure to cope, you can actually stockpile it. It is a vital resource for all factions, and some factions have little or no farmland of their own, which of course implies new forms of leverage. Here's an example. Now, we've mentioned food before, and I did think it was going to come into it as well. And the other thing you can do is you can actually break, from sounds of it, you can break agreements early, which is obviously going to make you very untrustworthy to other factions. So while it might be worth doing on occasion, if you do it too much, when you do it, you need to be ensure you're in a position where you can weather the negative effects of that, because it's going to make you look dishonourable and make every faction dislike you. Anyway, ever the artful governor, Liu Biao, has been negotiating food trade deals with other warlords and developing grain storage building chains in each of his commanderies in order to stockpile. He currently has 60 surplus food. Public order is at an all-time high, and his patrolling armies are few but well provisioned. But now, to expand his army count, he needs a new revenue stream. He approaches the warlord, Yuan Shao, whose holdings have remained modest and profitable, but with no farms of his own. He struggles with food provision. Yuan Shao has approached Liu Biao several times before in order to score food trades. His northern commandery is threatened by Dong Zhou, who has been using his armies aggressively. Liu Biao spies his opportunity. He offers Yuan Shao 50 food in order to become his vassal. It's a big ask, of course, but with vassalage comes a pledge of military support which Yuan Shao sorely needs. He agrees to the deal and becomes Liu Biao's vassal. Trade agreements can also be arranged via the trade and marriage menu, of course. Individual regions can now be traded, region trading, guys, which is one of the most effective ways of gaining long-term access to specific mined resource, agricultural lands or towns, and you can now use ancillaries as a bargaining chip to swing deals or trade, or as trade items in their own right. Many of these are practical, such as weapons, armor and mounts. So coming back to, you have weapons, armor and mounts which you can use and potentially equip on things, which, okay, we've had some of this before, but the mounts is a bit different. Weapons and armor is something you'll be aware of from Warhammer games if you've done them, but I don't know quite how it'll work in this. Some are merely ornamental but valuable. Some grant unique abilities or skills when giving to a character, and some are legendary in nature, such as unique weapons and armor of the legendary warlords of the Three Kingdoms period. And yes, you can arrange marriages. When a marriage proposal is made, you can decide where the couple will reside, with your faction or with the spouses. This can be a useful way of acquiring a specific character for your faction, which can benefit you in a number of ways. So when you create a marriage, you can steal a character to your faction, or you can get rid of a character to increase your reputation even more. Anyway, that's all for now. We'll be back soon with a second of our diplomatic videos. So I will be back when we get the second one of these, guys. I will do another Let's Talk Three Kingdoms about the diplomacy, guys. I do hope that you have enjoyed this. As always, please feel free to pop any comments in the comments section or jump over to my Discord, guys. I I do hope you've enjoyed this. As I said, I've pointed out a few extra little bits and pieces. This is something a bit new to me. I've done 5 or 6 now, but please, constructive feedback is always more than a welcome. So please go ahead with that. As mentioned, there is a link to my Discord in the comments of the description, as well as links to my Twitter, my Patreon, and all of my affiliations. Well, my 2 affiliations with Fanatical and Overclockers UK. Thank you very much for your time today, guys.